Welcome to the Bakersfield City Council meeting. This television broadcast is brought to you by the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m., Sunday at 10 a.m., and the following Wednesday at 7 p.m. You can download the agenda for this meeting at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over this evening's meeting, the Honorable Mayor Karen K. Go.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to call to order the 5:15 City Council meeting of November the 28th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Smith.
I'm here.
Councilmember Rivera. Here. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Weir.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Sullivan. Councilmember Parlier.
Here.
Thank you. Well, welcome. We have a lot of students here. CSUB, raise your hand. Oh, there are many of you. It must be school time. And anyone from BC? Welcome. We're glad that you're here to engage in the civic process with us. And we have some other very special guests, and I will be introducing them shortly. So at this time, we will have Pastor Jim Aiken from Heritage Bible Church. He's a senior pastor there, and he's going to be offering the invocation. We're really glad to have him. The church also supports education greatly, and Ready Land Preschool and Heritage Academy. So we're really grateful for your church's investment in our community. We also had the privilege today of some very special guests. This front row is filled with state champions, a historic win. So we have with us the Ridgeview High School cross-country team, and they won the Division III CIF State Cross-Country Championship. Ridgeview is the very first program in the city of Bakersfield ever to win a state cross-country championship. So we are so glad that you're here today. It's Ridgeview's first state championship in athletics also, and we're privileged also to have Coach Ryan Lucker, and I'm sorry, I missed the other coach's name. Dabbs, Coach Dabbs. And then our students, Alex Cuevas, Aced Adus, Gerardo Moreno, Brian Gaxiola, Jonah Molina, Jordan Bueno, and Jose Gonzalez. And thank you so much. They're going to be leading us in the pledge, and I think it would be appropriate for these state champions to get a round of applause. Congratulations. Pastor, come and lead us now in the prayer, and if you would all stand, please.
Having run cross-country in high school, I can appreciate what a great achievement these young men have done, and something that gives great pride to our city. So we're grateful for that. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, as we gather here tonight, first of all, we thank you for what this Ridgeview team was able to accomplish and the pride we take in their efforts. God, we also thank you for the rain that you've given to our city. Living in Bakersfield, we don't take that for granted, and we appreciate that gift and the forecast of rain throughout this week. Lord, as we gather tonight, I want to pray for the leaders of our city. Thank you that you've raised up men and women to serve in that capacity. We pray that you would give them vision, that they would see the potential of all that you want them to do. Pray that you'd give them passion and sense your heart for the city. May they have courage to make wise decisions. Lord, we know that you've ordained institutions in society that would provide love and stability and direction. Institutions such as family, church, government. And so we pray for these government leaders, city council, who really are your servants fulfilling their duties. We pray you provide discernment as they pursue consensus and collaboratively work for the good of our city and for your glory. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. And now from Ridgeview High School, Coach, if you would like to say a few words before we begin the pledge, or have a student. Or you don't have to, you can just lead the pledge. or one of your students, why don't you all come up together and say salute pledge?
Yeah, say salute.
Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated, and coach and team and pastor, you're free to leave at this point. I would love to grab a photo with you. Aaron, if you're still out there and you can grab one in the lobby, just go ahead and take their photos. But thank you so much, and congratulations again for putting our names on the map and for your extraordinary feat. It took a lot of effort, and thank you, all of our best. Congratulations. Madam Clerk, please read the first item.
Under Presentations, Item A, we have a certificate of recognition to Thomas and Kathleen Weir, owners of the Edgewater Drive home, awarded Yard of the Season Fall 2018.
You might be getting married. It is such an honor to have you here.
Pleasure.
Great
Nice
to have you
meet
here.
I've seen you before, but this is wonderful. This
Well,
is
we're
a huge honor.
We are glad to have you here, and we are so glad that you have contributed in beautifying our community. We have a Keep Bakersfield Beautiful committee, and that's our commitment to our community to make it beautiful. But because of what you have done in your own neighborhood, you have contributed to the beautification, and so we have a few photos to show you. Fall 2018 Yard of the Season, Thomas and Kathleen Weir.
Whose house is that?
He did it all.
So it is my honor to be able to present this to you, certificate of recognition presented to Thomas and Kathleen Weir, property owners, in recognition of your home being named the Keep Bakersfield Beautiful Committee's Fall 2018 Yard of the Season. It's my honor to present this to you. Congratulations. And Kathy Butler, we have something else to give to you. Do you want to come up here and, yeah. Let me present this to you, and then I'm going to give you something else, too.
Honor.
Hold on to that.
Now, have bragging rights.
I love it. I love it. We can put Christmas lights around it in our front yard.
That's adorable.
So this is Ms. Kathy Butler, who is representative on the Keep Bakersfield Beautiful Committee, and
Yes.
is our photographer here. If not, hopefully in the lobby. Oh, you brought your own. You brought your own people.
I peeked. That's sweet.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I'm
Congratulations.
honored. He did all the work. I fed him the whole time.
All right. Very good. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public statements.
At this time, we'll receive public statements. All statements are given a 3-minute time limit, 15 minutes per topic. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, please give those to the clerk, and she'll give them to the City Council. Please avoid any behavior that disrupts the meeting. We're very interested and concerned with your issues, but due to the public notice requirements of the Brown Act, the council can't take action when an item isn't on the agenda. The council can, however, refer your matter to committee or request that staff contact you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the first public speaker?
Mayor, we have received 2 speaker cards this evening, both on separate subjects. The first speaker, Matthew Woods, regarding a sewer truck.
Mr. Woods?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I wanted to address an agenda item AG this evening, which is in regards to a sewer truck. My name is Matt Woods. I'm the Vice President with Haker Equipment Company. And my purpose here this evening is to free up resources for the city of Bakersfield, which we all know that they're limited. And to ask that you do not approve the sewer truck this evening. Haker Equipment Company was the lowest responsive bidder that met 100% of the specifications. The lowest bidder was $2,000 low bid. It did not comply with 51 items on the bid specification. I have an email from the user department stating that out of the 51 items, 33 of them were considered important. And these items represent about a $30,000 savings to the city. In my letter to your offices, I listed 12 items that I want to address. Item 4, 5, 8, and 10. The first item is a dump height that was asked for by the city. There was a dump height requirement of 60 inches, and the lowest responsive bidder was providing 48 inches. That would be like asking for a dam to be built 5 feet high, and you would accept the 48-inch bid by the lowest bidder. The fifth item is a spec for 4 cylindrical cyclone separators, which is an additional cost on my bid of about $5,000. So at this time, I know that you can read the rest of the items. The last item that I'd like to address is it was responded by your staff that this particular item was required by the specification, which required 270 degrees rotation of a hose reel. The response was that theirs is 360 degrees, which is actually false. I've provided you the documentation that their hose reel is 180 degrees. These extra items that were on the bid of the 51 items, all I ask, I'm not asking you to award this to me this evening. What I'm asking is that you just rebid and simply change the specifications to these lower specifications that you're accepting from this other bidder, because I can save the city about $30,000. So that's what I asked the council and the mayor this evening.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, sir. I did look at stuff that was in the package last week, and staff is recommending a continuance of your issue tonight.
Pardon me?
Staff is recommending a continuance of the bid.
Okay,
Just to let you know, we won't take action until it comes up on the agenda.
okay. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
David Lyman regarding new promotional items.
Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, I'm David Lyman with Visit Bakersfield. Good evening. I am pleased to come before you tonight to unveil 2 new promotion items for our city. The first is a new postcard, Bakersfield postcard. You all have it in front of you, and you are the first ones to get it. We have gone back to the archives and updated a classic Bakersfield postcard design with current images of our city. This is the 5th postcard we've designed at Visit Bakersfield. They are all available free and available exclusively at our office at 515 Truxtun Avenue, right in front of the Amtrak station. The other item is the same design, postcard design, but on a much larger canvas, specifically 10 feet wide by 7.5 feet tall. It is a jumbo postcard. It is a pop-up display that we will use at trade shows. We will use at information tables for large events in town, like the CIF Wrestling at Rabobank Arena. It'll also be around town as a backstop for selfie spots. I would have liked to have brought it in here for you, but it's kind of difficult to get a 10-foot wide by 7 feet tall item, but it is set up in the lobby behind us. It's been there since late afternoon and will be there till tomorrow morning. I hope you get a chance to look at it. It's very impressive and we're very pleased with the outcome. I'm also pleased to tell you that both of these items were produced in-house by your staff, specifically one person, Joe Simpson, our marketing and events specialist at Visit Bakersfield. And these are just two items that he's produced for us in the year and a half he's been with us, and just two more ways we can show residents and visitors alike that in Bakersfield there really is more to explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyman. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Under appointments, we have 2 appointments of alternate members to the Bakersfield Youth Commission due to vacancies. Applications for appointment were received from Kevin Dewey and Christina Evans. A staff memorandum has been received indicating that applicant Christina Evans is eligible for both the Ward 4 alternate and the mayor's at-large alternate positions, and Mayor Go has expressed interest in appointing Ms. Evans to the vacant at-large position.
Thank you. These appointments are by ward, therefore no ballots are required. So I'm going to first call Councilmember Gonzalez for the Ward 2 nomination, then I'll make the mayor's nomination, and after that we'll ask the vice mayor to make a motion to confirm the appointments. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor Go. I'd like to nominate Kevin Dewey to the Ward 2 alternate position.
Thank you. And then I'm pleased to nominate Christina Evans to the mayor's position, alternate position. She is a junior at Bakersfield Christian High School, and the vice president of Student Life says about her, it's rare to have a student who exemplifies as many wonderful characteristics as Tina does. Her heart, her character, and her motivation are second to no one on our campus. So I am pleased to nominate Ms. Christina Evans. Vice Mayor?
I will move to approve the 2 nominations.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Consent calendar items 8A through 8AL for approval. A staff memorandum has been received regarding item 8AG, requesting this item be deferred to the December 12th meeting.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I have to admit, I did not ask the council members if anybody wanted to pull anything, so I will ask now. Seeing none, I will first say that I will not be voting on item 8T, as I have a conflict of interest on that particular item. And I will make a motion for items 8A through AL, accepting AG, which we want to defer until the December 12th meeting.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Hold on.
And actually,
Oh,
just for
I'm sorry.
clarification, that'll just be, staff's recommendation is to continue it, so you are making a motion to continue that particular item.
That is correct.
Thank you.
You have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Council and mayor statements.
Councilmember Parlier.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we just had devastating fires that affected people to the north and the south of us, and I just want to thank the Bakersfield Fire Department for doing their part to help these people that have been so affected by this tragedy. So, good job, Chief, to you and your team. I'd like to refer an item to Safe Neighborhoods regarding the homeless point in time count. I believe the pit count takes place at the end of January. So I'd like to have that take place, or at least staff think about having it taking place before that time, so we can just talk about maybe ways we can do that better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just in line with what Councilmember Parlier said, I found the presentation earlier by Mr. Gill very, very compelling, and appreciate the council's action on the matter. You know, certainly we've all said many times homelessness is the one issue that we hear on a daily basis. We hear frequent topics of complaints on that, and we also realize just with what Mr. Gill said in terms of we are our brother's keeper. That kind of presentation, and I think other presentations that we've had, continue to open our minds to potential solutions. And along those lines, I would like to hear from our city manager's office about plans that can be formulated as to how we as a council and staff can come up with ideas of mitigating and hopefully ending homelessness according to the official definition in Bakersfield. It's certainly very, very complex. I realize that Measure N is very, very critical to our resource availability, but I'm interested in hearing what's being done on a staff level to formulate the strategies for council and staff to further evaluate and consider what can be done. So, Alan, if you would be able to address the question at the next council meeting and either maybe a workshop or report setting, I think it would be helpful just to provide us a platform for further discussion, just some brainstorming and what you might come back at a very initial stage, even though at this point we really don't know. But what are some potential strategies that that you might be thinking of that we can think of as we move forward?
Mayor Go, it is a problem of enormous complexity. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask for more than 2 weeks to do a job that we would be proud of. We're also involved in a number of other year-end things right now that occupy a great deal of our time.
When do you think you would be able to
So if you'll give me
do
that
that?
indulgence, I will
Yes.
be happy to return at a later date.
Thank you. Approximately, do you have any idea when that might be?
To cure homelessness.
Not to cure, to mitigate. What are we going to do as a city? What kind of strategies might we be taking that council can consider?
First action in a month.
Okay. Thank you. Other council members? Any other comments? Seeing none, we stand adjourned at 5:48. Thank you.
The 3:30 p.m. meeting of the Bakersfield City Council is now in session.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to call to order the 3:30 City Council meeting of November 28th, 2018. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go,
Here.
Vice Mayor Smith,
I am here.
Councilmember Rivera,
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Here.
Councilmember Weir, Councilmember Freeman, Councilmember Sullivan, and Councilmember Parlier.
Thank you. To comply with the Brown Act, we'll receive public statements now. Please limit your comments to the workshop and closed session items only at this time. All statements are given a 3-minute time limit, 15 minutes per topic. Are there any public statements, Madam Clerk?
Christine Moore, we have one public statement from Christine Moore regarding workshops item 3B.
Welcome, Ms. Moore. Please introduce yourself. and
Thank
proceed.
you. I'm Christine Moore, Director of External Affairs for AT&T. Do I need to give my address?
No.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Go, Vice Mayor Smith, and members of the Bakersfield City Council. I'm delighted to be here today on behalf of AT&T, and I want to express our excitement at the discussion that will happen today. AT&T has been investing $150 million in CapEx investments in Kern County in the last 3 years, and we are very happy to continue that investment in Bakersfield with a small cell build. We have been working closely with Nick Fidler and his team, along with your City Attorney's Office and a few other folks, and those conversations have been very productive and are ongoing as we speak. So I want to give you a little bit of information about the benefits of small cells. Small cells complement traditional larger cell towers in high traffic areas. They help densify the network to allow a better wireless experience today and prepare our network for future technology. Today, Americans use an average of 12 different apps a day. Data traffic is expected to increase 5 times per phone by 2022. Small cells are essentially a building block for pocket-sized solutions that help us manage our lives from our phones and can be applied at the city scale to provide officials with detailed dashboards to understand your communities block by block. They allow citizens to seamlessly integrate daily lives in their urban space and connect our personal devices with city services on which they rely. Whether it's alerting emergency services when smartwatches detect a fall, or using real-time data to manage traffic flow to keep citizens crossing the street safely in a busy city corridor, smart city technologies bring an unprecedented level of connectivity to city life. By delivering enhanced capacity and faster connectivity, small cells lay a strong network foundation needed for various smart city initiatives that can enable new opportunities for Bakersfield's residents and businesses. I want to give you some examples of that. I think that the city is familiar with the ShotSpotter technology that has been trialed by the police department. That's one example of a platform that would ride on a small cell network. It gives you real-time connectivity to incidents that are happening as they occur. That gunfire detection technology allows law enforcement to react quickly and efficiently. Other things that could be used are remote sensors on light posts and other infrastructures to monitor air quality, to monitor traffic, energy efficiency, autonomous vehicles. All of those ride on this small cell technology platform. There are also some kind of fun things that we're doing with small cell technology. I want to talk about something called Era. It's a wearable. I want to make sure I monitor my time. Those are glasses that can be worn by visually impaired folks, and that last year we had somebody run the Boston Marathon for the first time wearing Era glasses with remotely guided by somebody who was in another location. So those kinds of things can be done on this platform, this small cell technology. I have Terry here with our company Vinculums representing us to answer any technical questions you might have, and we're also available to meet with each of you individually if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Under workshops, item A, presentation by Lois Gill, Chief Executive Officer of the Bakersfield Homeless Center regarding request for city funding.
Thank you. Mr. Gill, please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Louis Gill. I'm the CEO of the Bakersfield Homeless Center and the Alliance Against Family Violence and Sexual Assault. There we go. Mayor, council members, thank you for this opportunity to come before you and speak about this growing crisis that we have in our community. And thank you, Councilmember Parlier, for the recommendation to have me come do the presentation. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about numbers, percentages. I'm going to talk about service levels. I'm going to talk about funding levels. I'm going to talk a lot about the mechanics of service provision. But first, I want to remind us of what we're talking about and of whom we're talking about. So I just have a couple examples of calls that we get, emails we get every day from individuals hoping that they can get some help. I'm homeless with nowhere to go. I'm at a friend's house right now. I've been beaten up and sexually assaulted. It's happened more than once. Can you help me? Or, my 1-year-old daughter and I are facing to become homeless in a matter of days. We received a notice due to selling of the house we're renting. The water's being shut off today, leaving my daughter and I with nowhere to go. We're in desperate need of help, so please reach back to me ASAP. I have 3 kids. We're homeless. We're sleeping in my car. We've been sleeping where we hope to find a warm house or maybe somewhere with warm water. Today is the last straw. Our money is gone. We'll literally be on the streets. I'm going to have to watch my kids go to school filthy. Do you know anybody that can help me? Thank you for listening, and God bless. And then finally from a father, please help me. Me and my family are about to be homeless, and we don't have anywhere to go. I can't be in the streets with my wife and daughter. I don't know what to do. Please help. Oh, there we go. So what would you do with this? Well, you guys call us. I've had phone calls from almost everybody up there, with many of the heads of departments, with law enforcement, hospitals, county departments. Everybody looks to us for help with this very difficult problem. And right now, in our difficulty, we're turning to you. The safety net has a hole in it. It's not due to neglect. It's because of the quantity of extreme poverty that it's having to hold. There is incredible suffering in our community. We have to take responsibility for it. And I have to ask, if we don't take responsibility, if those of us that are able to make decisions do not take responsibility, then who? Then who? I understand that we don't want to be responsible for everything. This isn't everything. This is clean sheets. This is a warm meal. I was fortunate enough to attend the Big 11 Mayor Gathering up in Sacramento with our mayor, Mayor Go. And we got to hear the mayor of San Diego say something that I thought was incredibly poignant to the governor. And he said, homelessness is not an issue that we're dealing with. It is the issue in our state. Our city is slow to respond to this. Other cities have developed entire departments, task force with their counties. They have gotten together to get this work done. Orange County, when they tried to move homeless people recently because of response to business concerns, had to spend $2 million in a month on hotel rooms. Fresno, the city of Fresno, because of a federal court ruling in September, required to increase bed space. We have to get ahead of this. So just to remind you, homelessness on a national scale, that's what we're looking at. California holds 1/4 of the homeless population. For California, there you can see our total population. Kern County, we only found 810 in our last census. We know that's low. We know that it's going to be higher this year. I personally think it's going to come out somewhere closer to Fresno-Madera County's numbers, but we're fortunate that we've been doing good work, because otherwise, if we were at the state level, we would have about 3,000 people on the street. More needs to be done. I don't want you to forget that the homelessness is fatal. The streets will take your life. Sometimes it takes time. It can be a health issue. It can be chemical dependency. The gentleman that card is about was a veteran of both the Army and the Navy, and 7 days after that he had been convinced that he should take the veterans benefits that he had earned, his diabetes killed him, and he died on the streets. This year so far, we've had 2 men sleeping outside that were executed in their sleep that were homeless. Somebody just walked up and shot them. At our facility, there is a constant demand of new people seeking assistance. On average, 466 unduplicated women and children seeking assistance. There's no other options. They're in vehicles. They're with friends or family. This is a hard truth about our community, that we are unable to respond to that. We cannot make that worse by failing to keep the safety net where it is. It is entirely unacceptable that this is a truth for the total amount of support that we can garner from our community. So what's going on? We've got a rising crisis and we're projecting a shortfall. The shortfall has not arrived yet. That is why we are here. We are a solvent, healthy organization, but we are trying to get ahead of something that is coming down the road. The point is, I've come out and I've had the opportunity to talk to almost every one of the council members except for Council Member Sullivan. I've had a chance to talk this over with you. I've had a chance to let you ask questions. We're going to need some help. The crisis hasn't arrived for us financially yet. So what's going on? There's an increased demand for services. Government funding is incredibly restricted. It has to be laser focused. We cannot deviate outside of those contracts. Private funding cycles change. And then we have a facility that runs 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And so there's just stuff that costs to run it. And in my conversations with a number of council members, a couple have said, so you just want us to fund the status quo, that which you've always done. No, that's not it. We've been doing more and we continue to do more. Demand for services. Sheltered people over the last 2 years up by 13%. We did not stretch our facility and magically put in 13% more beds. We have just brought in more people and gone beyond what we have been able to do, but people are outside. And I challenge you to have a mother and a child show up at your doorstep and say, go sleep outside. Oops, how do I go back? Thank you. There you go. Meals are up by 20%. That's almost 3,000 more months a meal. Meals a month. That's a significant increase. That's not just the people that stay with us. Those are folks coming from the houses that are around our facility. They're coming out of cars. They're coming out of parks. The community has food vulnerability, and they're seeking assistance. Years ago, you'd only see men walking up from the community. Now, of course, there are plenty of single women, and we also see children come up from the neighborhood just looking to get a meal. We have absolutely no expectations. Anybody that shows up, if you say you're hungry, we're going to feed you, because that's what's right. Now, the solution to homelessness is a home. I would like you to look at 2014. At 2014, we placed 353 people in permanent homes. We thought we were going at an incredible pace. That was almost one person a day. Now, leap forward to last year, we helped to place 1,426 people in permanent homes. That is 68% of all people placed out of homelessness into a permanent home in Kern County. That is the scope and the scale of what we do. The crisis is here. We responded. We're already doing a great deal more. We're asking for you to help us with that. Funding restrictions. We have looked everywhere at our revenues and expenses to try and find the challenges and where we could make changes. We are governed by the Hearth Act on any money that comes from the federal government. Those are all HUD funds. The majority of that is either through emergency service grants, which is a smaller portion. The larger portion are the rapid rehousing grants. Those are used for utilities, rent, and deposit assistance to help people move into permanent homes. One of the things that we are challenged by is that when we take on these contracts through both the city and the county, there is an allowable administrative percentage. That percentage is taken off the top by both the city and the county, and then we need to raise unrestricted dollars to subsidize the reporting requirements in order to satisfy the contract. That's been going on for a very long time. Everybody has operating costs, and it takes time to turn around invoices for payment. I understand that. We need cash to pay our bills each month, so we have to draw on a line of credit. Every one of our contracts with any public entity specifically says that you will not reimburse us for interest on that line of credit, but it's a necessary part of our work. So again, we raise private dollars to subsidize that work. If you look at our budgets over the last several years, you will see that our organization has grown a great deal, primarily through rapid rehousing. I want you to understand that those dollars are pass-through dollars. Those are monies that have to go to rental assistance, utilities assistance, and deposits. We cannot divert that towards our need. There's been changes in the community. United Way used to be a big supporter of our emergency services. They're no longer giving out grants. The city of Bakersfield has had their own tussles with high-speed rail, and we have been painted by that brush, and ever since then we have seen a significant drop in unrestricted support. We have had to have individuals come up to us and tell us they are deferring donations until we know what our future is. And that's just the situation it is. The only thing that I can attribute it to is there's just a really negative feeling here in Bakersfield and in much of the valley about high-speed rail. We're a 24-hour, 365-day facility. Hundreds of people come through. With the impending location, we've got to figure out what do you repair, what don't you repair, what investments do you make now, what do you not, right? What's going to have to wait, because we're still uncertain about that future. And then, of course, as California changes its minimum wage, those contracts that we have with the federal government, they don't modify. They don't increase to match that. So for our entry-level positions alone for our organization, that's a $54,000 hit to the payroll. So I want to make sure that I'm as transparent as possible. And so I want you guys to see where the money comes for these emergency services that we're talking about and what we're requesting. So there it is. Those are the totals that it takes to run our dorm and our food, our kitchen. 38% and 62%. Now, what are those federal and state grants made of? Well, there's ESG money, which is HUD money, which comes through both the city and the county. You can see the levels up there. We have some money through something called CACFP, which is a reimbursement for feeding children that the state provides some funding to us. Then we also get money through the EFSP program, which is part of FEMA. Now, FEMA can be really fickle because depending upon what natural disaster has happened, we have lost an entire year of funding. Now, the other thing that happens with this contract is that we are expected to start spending money up to 6 months prior, and we don't even know if the contract is coming. But we have to accomplish the contract. So again, there's your line of credit that you have to draw on. And one of the other allowable funding sources that would be available for work like ours is, of course, community development block grants. There is a 15% service cap for any city or county that receives that. Those dollars go to other services, not those that we do. Our other funding, of course, 30% of the 62% is private donations, so those just going out and getting individuals, designating it towards that emergency service. Of course, we are out hustling food and whatever items we need. Sometimes it's just a repair to our delivery van. And then, like every other organization in town, we are soliciting large donations from individual donors that have the capacity for that. And then, the truth be told, we often just sit down and ask for assistance. So there's a fully funded emergency services for us and the way it would break down. On the right-hand side, if you see that 21% county general, they have provided that. And that has been allocated and deposited in our account. It's that other 21% that we're talking to you about today. If Westchester suffered a natural disaster, if it burnt down, and we had hundreds of people homeless, all y'all would garner every resource available to make sure that we responded. And there would be no end to what would be done. That crisis exists. They just didn't come out of that neighborhood. Somebody had to respond for the folks that are outside. We did. I really struggled with keeping this slide in, but I decided, what the heck, in for a penny, in for a pound. That which is right will never stand up to a cost-benefit analysis. It just doesn't. Right? How do you measure a child that has a full tummy sleeping in a warm bed? How do you quantify that? What's the price on that? It's important to remember what we're talking about. I know that we all make hard decisions. We're talking about lives with no other option. We're talking about suffering that you guys have the authority and the ability to relieve. Now, I was asked to prepare what that $200,000 means and what it could represent if we are not able to get that support. It would mean folks in the community wouldn't get to eat. It's equivalent of 4 months of shelter. That's 174 beds a night. Think of those folks downtown. We are very fortunate that we have great donors for our warehouse. We get everything: dishes, plates, mattresses, you name it. And we are a partner with a ton of organizations. Everybody refers to us. They put together wish lists and we fill it. We provide safety net services. That takes people. We couldn't do that. And the thing is that there's no organization to absorb this work. And if it needed to go somewhere else, they're going to be right here asking for assistance because of the decision made. What's it going to look like outside? We have not had to stomach women and children outside sleeping in public places. That is not a regular sight for us. If that became the case, that would be a very difficult thing for our city. Code enforcement and law enforcement do not need the additional pressure. Chief is understaffed as it is. Downtown would not be happy to have additional pressure down there. Again, there is nobody to absorb this work. We are the only emergency homeless shelter for women and children in Kern County. We're also the only one that takes single men with fathers. Hospitals, behavioral health, the Department of Human Services, law enforcement, they all rely on us. Churches, they turn to us because they need help. Our work is able to relieve that desperation that you can feel when you don't know what's going to happen for you and your family. What would you be willing to do if you couldn't feed your kids? If you got tired of watching your wife sleep on a sidewalk? What are the actions and the choices you'd be willing to take? Let's not put people in that position. We have an integrated set of services. We try and get ahead of it where we can with the limited prevention dollars. Emergency food and shelter is your basic stabilization so that you can scoop somebody up. We find out what happened. We assess what's keeping them out of housing. When their children do not have licensed daycare, we're able to provide it. We can get folks placed back into a permanent home, and then we stay with them so they don't have to fall back out. If they haven't been employed in a long time, or God forbid, they don't have a perfect record and nobody will hire them, we're the ones that folks are coming to. They get a job, they can move out. little side positive note on our jobs program, we just had our 103rd person leave the program for full-time employment. We are a major part of the reason why things aren't worse. Our folks are good at what they do. We get somebody placed in a permanent home, less than 7% return to homelessness. That is definitely the most economical way of dealing with this issue. Everybody that we keep in a home, we save about $24,000 a year in services. The city and the county are going to be more involved in this. They just are in this scope of work. Your constituents aren't going to give you any option. There's growing pressure. This is a major issue for every one of you. You guys have said time and time again, I've heard each of you say that homelessness is a priority. So I ask you, is this a priority? If it is, there's got to be somewhere. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Council members, do we have comments or questions? Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Gill, thank you so much for your presentation and for your service to the community. I want to thank all of your staff and all those folks who work day in and day out to help our community out. You're right, this is a community-wide problem, and it's a concern that I know the entire council shares. We have shared. Vice Mayor Smith, in fact, was good enough to organize a workshop, a series of homelessness workshops we had earlier this year to identify specific gaps in services. And we asked specifically for the Kern County Homeless Collaborative to identify those gaps. And we've been working methodically through that list. I know because I've been part of those meetings firsthand with the city manager and the mayor and others. I just had a couple of questions regarding your presentation. And again, I want to thank you for coming to us today. When this request first came about, I was under the impression that it was a one-time request. Is that still true, or is this an ongoing request, $200,000 each and every fiscal year?
I am making a request for this year.
Okay. And so what happens in year 2?
I do not believe this crisis will be over with. We will need to continue to work on this. I believe that the city and the county will be greater involved in this issue, above and beyond this request that I am making. I don't know how other organizations or how the city will choose to respond, but this is a crisis that does exist. And if we don't respond, we're going to only have it grow.
So what is occurring within your organization to address the growing need, budget constraints currently and in the future to help meet the growing demand?
So we have had to adjust. We are cutting expenses in our kitchen. We are cutting expenses in transportation. We're looking at what can be eliminated as any other organization. We have added staff for raising money. We are doing everything I know to do to go after additional resources. In my 19 years, that experience has brought us to this point where we need to turn to those with the authority to help and say, we need help right now.
And your presentation was helpful for me. And the other question I had was regarding the $200,000 and where does it go specifically? Is it to fund existing levels of service, or is it for the future growth? And I think I heard in your presentation that it's for that additional demand for services next year. Is that correct?
It is for the additional demand for service that we've been experiencing and continue to experience.
Okay.
As I said in my presentation, it has been growing significantly for the last 3 years. And so we have to address that spike in demand.
And so, just getting down to brass tacks, I want to be sure I understand specifically, if we were to enter into a contract with the homeless center, where specifically does that money go?
For operation of our emergency shelter and of our emergency food program.
Okay.
So that will be everything from staffing to purchasing. So what it takes to run an emergency shelter and an emergency kitchen.
Okay, and what are the costs? What's the cost per meal for the shelter?
I don't have it by meal. I can tell you it's a little over $800,000 to run those two programs.
Okay. And for the meals program, can you break it out to kind of give us a sense of what that cost is?
I can bring that to you. I don't have that broken out today.
Okay. How many beds are in the shelter?
We have 174 beds,
Okay.
and then we have cribs and cots.
Okay. And what is the average length of stay?
We are working to make it a 90-day stay. It's not unusual for much larger families to take a longer time. So we have had families with as many as 11 children.
Mm-hmm.
And that can take several months to find a landlord that's willing to take a chance on an individual.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, the answers you're providing are very helpful for me to get a better sense of how we're thinking about this issue. And I'm very sympathetic to the cause, and someone who works in nonprofits and has for the last 12 years, understand the issues. And so definitely want to explore how I can be helpful. You know, as a council member who's part of a city with very significant budget constraints at this time, and after spending a year communicating with the community, our fiscal situation, you know, it's not, this request does not come easily for us at this time. And so those are sort of the questions I'd like to look at a little more if we can. Council members, if you give me the opportunity, I'm looking forward to sending this to Budget and Finance so that I can have a longer conversation with you and with staff. Thank you.
Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a few questions, and indulge me for thinking out loud. I think the presentation was great. In fact, I would actually love to be able to get it by email at some point as well, because I think there's some useful statistics in there, especially. I'm intrigued by and pleasantly intrigued by the number of homeless placements and I guess the progress you guys have made there, going from, what was it, I think, what did it say, 800 placement or 400 placements to 1,400?
In 14, it was a little over 350, and this last year it was 1,426.
Yeah, that's incredible. You know, this is certainly an item that I think is on everyone's mind. Like Councilmember Gonzalez just said, I think the city spent a lot of time over the course of the last year, you know, attempting to educate the community on this item. We certainly hear a lot about the item. I think it was one of you know, one of the key components to the sales tax measure that was put on the ballot, and I think that was for good reason. One, because I think there is an ever-growing challenge in this community, and two, I think a lot of people in Bakersfield are becoming more aware of this problem. And I don't know that they're necessarily equipped or otherwise prepared like you are and others are to address the issue, but they're certainly plugged into the fact that there's an ever-growing problem, And I know you guys are doing more with less, certainly, because of that. So I appreciate you coming in to update us, and I know you've had to wait since August to do so. So I appreciate you indulging us in coming here in November. I have a few questions because I can't recall you raised in your presentation the admin fee that the city collects on our CDBG dollars. And I'm wondering if maybe Ms. Kitchen could remind me, is it 20% or what is it that we shave off of the top to administer the program?
That is correct, Councilmember Rivera. It is 20%, and that does account for city staff and time to deal with the federal side, the paperwork and the accounting that goes along with the allocation of the funds.
So is it 20% of ESG and home dollars, or 20% of all CDBG dollars we receive before?
It is 20% of CDBG, and I can check, but I believe it's also 20% or 15% of ESG. It's broken out by each program funded.
Okay. What does that 20% actually represent monetarily?
I don't have the exact dollar amount, but last fiscal year in the adopted budget, it was around $650,000.
The administration fee was 600 and?
For CDBG, yes.
Okay. So I'm just trying to understand how from a budget perspective, how it is that we, I want to make sure I'm understanding how we're describing that. So when you say $650,000 for CDBG, is that across all programs then? That's the total for all program administration?
That's correct. In last year's adopted budget, the city was allocated about $3.2 million in CDBG entitlement overall. Okay. And then the 20% administrative was the $650,000, and all remaining funds were distributed between public services and projects.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Another question I have is, can you help me understand the process for amending mid-year? I'm not sure if this is considered mid-year, but amending the budget we submitted with allocations already reviewed by this council for our CDBG money. How do we go to the federal government and potentially change that? And is that even possible?
It is possible, and we do it almost yearly. Each year, your council adopts an action plan, typically in May, sometimes in April, and that is what is submitted to the federal government to spell out how these funds are allocated. And then occasionally at some point in the fiscal year, there's a change, there's a cost savings, one of the projects doesn't come to fruition, and an action plan amendment would then be brought before council to make a change in how that money is allocated.
Okay. Can you remind me, there was a pretty substantial amount of money I was surprised by. I think that was a part of a recent presentation, may have been the last council meeting, that was, I think, program savings we were rolling over to kind of supplement state funding on the homeless front. Can you remind me how much money we were talking about there?
Sure. That was about $560,000 in CDBG and $325,000 in NSP monies. And that was a result of some cost savings and a change in the federal accounting system that was made in the fiscal year 14-15. Typically, in the past, the city operated under the federal kind of first in, first out account system, which meant we were often a little bit ahead, and we would just allocate funds accordingly. However, HUD changed their accounting system to a fiscal year-based allocation, which is why we have that money that's now available for an alternative use.
Okay, thank you. Third question, this is also specific to CDBG dollars. I want to say it was either very early on this year or last year, we made an amendment or at least say an allocation change within CDBG to fund some police officers out of CDBG dollars, and that was an item that came out of Budget and Finance. Can you remind me what that amount? I thought it was about $300,000.
That's correct, and that was actually in the last 2 fiscal year action plans. So for 2 years now, approximately 300,000 has been allocated to that source.
Do, and maybe this is something Chief Martin could talk about, do we have a good idea of how much time, you might want to take a seat, Mr. Gill, if you'd like. You don't have to stand the whole time. I'm curious if maybe we're able to account for how much time those officers spend on dealing with the homeless population. And if there's something you want to add before that happens, Ms. Kitchen, let me know. Okay.
Mayor Go, Councilmember Rivera, we have the 12 impact officers that you are aware of that deal with the homeless population, but we also have 3 that are specifically assigned to the Mill Creek area, which are CDBG funded. We have GPS on all their vehicles, so we can account for every minute that they're in the target zone that they're working, so we can be very specific about reporting the time that they are in the zone using the CDBG dollars.
Okay, do we have, I mean, do we know, are they spending a lot of time taking calls from either businesses or even us or constituents or city residents in responding to the homeless population concentrated in that zone?
Yes, they spend a significant amount of their time doing those types of things.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. That's all I needed. And again, I ask folks to indulge me. I'm simply thinking out loud. And maybe I should have said this from the onset. I think, you know, I'm supportive of granting this request. I think in many ways, I think we rely on you and many others in this community to do a very important job. I think I've said this before, but I don't know that the city's necessarily put its money where its mouth is when it comes to this particular issue, and I think there is much more we should and can be doing to better partner with you guys. And I think we're ushering in that era, and I think we're moving in that direction, and I think you're going to hear a lot of new innovative ideas from this council and from the city and from staff and many others as that process unfolds. But in the process, you know, in the interim, I know what you guys do. In fact, I've worked with the Homeless Center for a few years, and I worked with the Alliance for a few years, and I know you guys do a lot. And so, you know, I think in honoring that, one, what you do, and honoring your mission and the service I think you provide to this community, and then in tandem with that, honoring, you know, the wishes and opinions and interest of the residents of the city of Bakersfield, I think it makes the most sense for us to give you the tools necessary to do your job. So, you know, I don't, like I said earlier, this request came in August. We're now in November. I understood there was some sensitivity, and so we wanted to delay this. But I know that I sat down with you months ago and received this request and had this discussion with you. I can't speak for other council members, but I imagine you've met with most, I think you said you've met with most of them somehow, sometime between then and now. I don't think this isn't a new request, and it certainly shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. I don't believe in making those we ask to do a lot for this community beg of this council. The county of Kern has already, as dysfunctional as the county might be, managed to figure out how to fulfill their end of the bargain in this particular request, and I would hope that the city could do the same thing. So I don't like the idea of sending this item to Budget and Finance, because I think that adds another unnecessary delay to getting you what you need. And I think if we sat here and talked to each council member, I think we'd at the end of the day agree that we need to get you whatever it is you need in order to continue serving this delicate population. So I'd rather you know, and hear from the rest of my colleagues, but I'd rather have this item just come bypass Budget and Finance, because if it goes to Budget and Finance, it's still going to have to come to the council. I'd rather the item just come back to us, and I'd rather do that as quickly as possible, knowing full well that as Christmas time approaches, it becomes an absolute nightmare to schedule stuff with us, and I know staff knows that, and I probably don't aid in that process. But I know that's going to be really difficult, and I would hate for this to be delayed any longer, otherwise take longer. So I'd rather, I'd rather ask staff to put on their thinking caps and come back to the full council as soon as possible. I know we have a meeting on December 12th. I don't see why we couldn't have a presentation back from staff on December 12th on some potential solutions to this. And so that would be my request, and that would be my motion.
Thank you. Mr. Gill, you mentioned, well, congratulations on the 1426 placements. Where would those people be without those placements?
They would be homeless. Those individuals come to us either through the shelters or other organizations that serve homeless individuals, and so they would be in the public. And so we are very fortunate that we have the rapid rehousing resources available, and I've got a great staff. I've got really good people that work for me, and they work really hard helping people that are desperate. And fortunately, we've been successful.
Thank you. Councilmember Parlier.
Thank you, Mayor. Lewis, you're really out there doing God's work, and I want to thank you and your staff for everything they do for this community and all the hard work that they do every day, year in and year out.
Thank you.
A question on your transportation. You made a comment that you've cut transportation. Does that mean, for example, my area's out southwest area of town, and the facilities to help homeless really isn't out there, and to be able to get them to the needs that they require, would that be some area of transportation that has been cut to be able to provide that to them?
No, that's not what I was referring to. I was referring specifically for our kitchen, and that would have to do with our trucks that go out, pick up donations, pick up the food and the resources that we need so that we're able to serve individuals. We literally are making choices on which older truck to repair or let sit, and we'll run extra shifts trying to get things picked up. So it doesn't have to do with transportation out in other wards. I don't know of an organization other than Flood that is going out and sometimes transporting people back. We've been known from time to time when we get a phone call from some of our electeds that we will go out and transport, but we typically don't have the staff or the vehicle available for that.
If you had the ability to have that, is that something that would be a good component of your operation?
I think that transportation has been a really big problem for the Homeless Collaborative in a while. There used to be something called the Kern Mental Health Association that had a van that would go around from the different shelters and go up to behavioral health. They'd go to KMC, and they ran a circuit, and they helped people, and it was a free service for individuals. And it was incredibly helpful, but they lost their federal funding, and that's been 8, 9 years now.
Okay, Lewis, thanks. Chief, quick question for you. So if beds are full and there's no one else to be able to take a homeless in on any particular night, and somebody, let's say, is sleeping out in front of somebody's house, and you don't have that ability to put them somewhere for the night, due to court decisions or state law, does that prevent you from even telling the person to move along, or are your hands tied in certain matters?
Councilmember Parlier, absolutely. If they're not breaking the law, then we are, and we don't have anybody to refer them to, then we just give them the information and try to get them we'll follow up with them the next day to try to get them to services during the daytime hours, but we can't force people to, especially if the shelter's full. I mean, there's nowhere to take them. So our hands are tied at that point.
Right. Now, let's say that the more homeless that are on the street, Do you have a feeling that it impacts your overall law enforcement services or can impact those services?
Absolutely, as Mr. Gill relayed to you, when people get hungry, people get desperate, which means then at some point, crime is going to increase because, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people are going to feed their children. They're going to do the things that they need to do to take care of themselves to survive. So, I'd have to stand here and say that, yeah, at some point, we're going to see a crime issue.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Well, I believe that staff, through other efforts, has done a great job. I've sat here in the past and talked about how smart our staff are and how innovative our staff are. But this is a crisis, a humanitarian crisis that continues to grow. And I feel that it has to be addressed. I mean, today, literally, at a shopping center that I never saw homeless at, I went to get my dry cleaning, and a person jumped out behind a wall, leaving a dumpster area, and I almost hit him with my car. And this is literally, like I said, an area that I've never seen homeless, and I've lived in that area for going on 30 years. I am in support of Councilman Rivera's motion, and I believe this is something that we might need to, maybe have a follow-up meeting to look at the totality of our budget and how things work, because this is potentially an item, unfortunate that it may be, that may have to be baked in somewhere. Now, with Councilman Rivera's motion, if for some reason that fails tonight, I would ask, with Andre's referral to Budget and Finance, that we come back as soon as possible. I don't think it requires a motion, but even if it's some sort of special meeting at the beginning of January to be able to address it. And thank you. That's it.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the work that you do. Now you're fine. Great work, and I've been vice mayor for 2 years now, and I've worked on this issue, focused on that along with the sales tax issue, knowing that the city needs more resources in order to serve the community and provide the services just like you that the community wants. And providing services requires resources, and that's where we've been with the sales tax, and I'm still hopeful that we'll find out in the next week or so where that ends up. You mentioned, I would ask the one question, you mentioned the high-speed rail, and I thought that had, you've got to deal with them and you're able to move forward now?
We are still in negotiations with them. We don't have any assigned contract. But I am encouraged by the conversations with them. We are talking to them in ways that they have never entertained us before. So I am cautiously optimistic as I am anytime I engage them.
Okay, great. And I get the same information that within the next month or so we should know more about that and have a deal. I too was impressed with your 1,400 and some placements. That is very positive news that people's lives are changed permanently in the right direction there. Appreciate that. I'm in favor with Councilmember Rivera's motion. I think that it's obvious that council wants to do something, and so I think that gives staff, a couple of weeks to figure out if we're going to do something and what are we giving up, or where would that money come from, and to have a report by then so that we actually know. I don't think it would be prudent just to say, yeah, let's write the check, because we don't know what we're giving up to write that check. And I think that if staff can give us some options at the next meeting, that would be great. So that's where I'm at.
Councilmember Weir.
Thanks, Mayor. Mr. Gill, could you come back up? And you had one slide that showed your budget and showed the different revenue sources for what emergency shelter and food. Could you bring that slide back up, please? That's it. Thank you. I had a conversation with Mr. Gill, and I told him that I sympathize with them, and I really do, and I think they're doing great work, and I want to help them. So I asked them if he would share some of their financial information with me. I don't have the information. He allowed me to see some of their financial information, and I was quite impressed with it. I got to see current operations versus budget, and on items that have a revenue stream, normal revenue stream, their budget seemed to be right on track with what was actually happening within the organization. And it gave me a level of confidence in that. In your budget that you showed me, it has all this broken down, but I think this slide, to me, when I see this, it portrays that if the city comes through with 21%, that you'll be fully funded in your budget. But as I looked at the budget document, even if the city is able to fund your request, it's not taking care of the entire problem, because your budget still shows a negative for these two items. Is that correct?
There is still an agency-wide negative that are part of our fundraising goals that will be our responsibility and that which we traditionally have to raise.
Right. So even if we were able to help and meet your request, you still have to put skin in this game to get the rest of the funding.
Absolutely.
Because according to my calculations, this only helps you meet about 83% of your cash requirements to keep this funding going, and about 70% of your overall budget requirements. So you still have a lot of work to do just to keep this program going, even if we are able to help fund it.
Which we are doing on a daily basis. That is a primary focus.
Okay. So I just want everybody to know that when we do this, we're not fully funding your operation.
No,
It is a partial fund. It is help. It's a one-time deal as far as we're concerned, and as we go forward, we'll be able to look at things and talk to you and have discussions. But for right now, it's a one-time deal, help you through the end of your fiscal year. And when we leave, regardless of our decision, you still have a lot of work to do to get that fully funded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All
We
right.
thought that it was an appropriate request to ask for emergency meals and emergency beds for the city.
I understand, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Mr. Gill, are your financials available on GuideStar should somebody in the public want to examine them?
Yes, they are. Our financials and also our audit. And I'm happy to email an audit to anybody. We are audited annually. Brown Armstrong currently has our contract. Before that, it was Daniel Phillips Von and Bach. We are a transparent and healthy organization.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on some comments that were made. I appreciate Councilmember Rivera's point in that it's probably good for the council to make a decision earlier rather than later, and not to delay it. My comment was only based on staff's recommendation, so I fully support the council coming back and making that decision sooner. When staff does come up with some analysis, I would like staff to include, not in addition to identifying resources, but also developing the measurable outcomes that we expect in a contract. So traditionally with any type of grant, whether it be government or private foundation, there are those specific benchmarks. And I'd like I'd like us to embed those in whatever decision we're making in that contract. It's clear to me that this is a one-time request, but in actuality, it's an ongoing expense. This is going to be an issue beyond this next year. And so we need to develop a framework of how we're going to make these decisions moving forward. It's also clear to me that there are many other nonprofit organizations that serve the homeless that may come to us as a result of this decision. And so it's important for us to, again, develop a framework of how we're going to make this decision and have clear, measurable expectations embedded in that contract. So that would be my request.
Seeing no one else, you have a motion. Please cast your votes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Under workshops, item B, presentation by City Manager's Office outlining required changes to city's ordinance related to wireless facilities in the public right-of-way.
Mr. Hewitt?
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Chris Hewitt, City Manager's Office. I am going to try to make this brief. This is a informational-only presentation this evening in regards to small cell wireless facilities. You may recall about a year or so ago or more, the council adopted some regulations related to these wireless facilities that are located in the city's right-of-way. And this topic has been evolving over the last year or so, and there's been some recent activity that we wanted to update you on and some changes that staff is recommending to the ordinance itself, as well as a separate document the staff's going to recommend be adopted at a later date in response to some of these changes. So just as a little bit of background, what we're talking about and what the speaker talked about earlier this afternoon is these small cell facilities that are generally located in the city's right-of-way, normally attached to telephone poles or street lights. And what they are equipment that mobile operators use to extend their service coverage and increase network capacity for demand on smartphones and other devices. Traditionally, in the past, you would see macro towers on private property, and there was essentially lease agreements between the telecoms or third parties and those property owners to site those macro towers. This is a rather new approach to providing these types of infrastructure and getting these services out to customers. You also may hear the term 5G. It's kind of the next phase of the telecommunications services. It's an upgrade from your 4G, your LTE. And essentially, that's part of the reasoning to get these small cell facilities out in the near future. So what I just showed you, I'm going to back up real quick. What I just showed you is a picture of an early version of small cell equipment that was on a telephone pole. This is not in the city of Bakersfield, but in another jurisdiction. And you can see it's very bulky and clunky. It's within a shot of a residential neighborhood there, just aesthetically not pleasing, and it creates, in this case, a lot of safety issues and right-of-way issues. And then what you see here is actually an application that was approved through our Public Works Department, and it's actually in service in the city of Bakersfield today. And you can see when the council developed ordinances and standards, this was the result, a rather clean-looking type of facility, and you can see the size and the antenna is a little bit cleaner than the last example I showed you. So telecoms have the power via the CPUC to place these types of facilities in public right-of-ways. Think, electric companies and gas companies have similar rights. So the City Council, again, adopted those regulations in 2017, and what those regulations did, it balanced the ability for the telecoms to roll out the technology while addressing some of the logistical and aesthetic concerns. There were basic time, place, and manner regulations that were built into the ordinance and to the design standards, and it allowed essentially the city to negotiate a fair market value for telecoms to co-locate on city-owned streetlights, meaning that for every pole that the telecoms wanted to locate on, there was an opportunity for city staff to negotiate an annual fee based upon, again, kind of a fair market value for those co-locations. Since that time, we've had 38 applications come in from 3 vendors, and we have 12 installations that are in place and operating. And again, you can see one of them here on the left. So in late September, the Federal Communication Commission made a ruling, and what that did was put in place, effective January 2019, some new regulations that impact every jurisdiction across the country, and it was a one-size-fits-all model. And there are several components of this that are concerning to the city, and I'll get into some of those details. What it does is it essentially restricts cities from enforcing time, place, and manner regulations in a lot of cases. It potentially limits the size requirements and some of the ability for the city to determine aesthetics and impacts to neighborhoods. It limits all fees to the actual cost incurred by the city. There's no now ability for the city staff to determine kind of a fair market value for these types of facilities when they're co-located on a city-owned streetlight. And it also puts in place shot clocks, meaning that we have about 2 months for these co-locations to make a decision on that application. If you recall, there was a similar bill, SB 649, that was opposed by over 200 California cities in 2017. That was vetoed by the governor, but it contains some of the similar types of things that the FCC ruling is now doing. So what are the impacts of the FCC ruling, and why are we here recommending some changes that will be upcoming? We'll no longer be able to negotiate the fair market value, as I mentioned. So the FCC will cap that at about $270 per pole per year versus the $750 to $1,000 that was considered a fair market value that the city was negotiating. Again, they have that shot clock of about 60 days. And I think one of the most pressing issues is that without some specific action that staff is going to be recommending here, that come January 19, there will be very little control over the place, the aesthetics, and those components of these installations. However, the city can grandfather certain design standards in place if a design policy document is adopted prior to that January date that I talked about, and I'll get into what that means here. I do want to mention that there is a legal challenge. The League of California Cities and other jurisdictions are challenging the FCC ruling. The city has joined the suit as an intervener. Deputy City Attorney Andy Heglin has been involved and can answer any questions regarding that if you do have questions on this component. It is really too early to know the outcome of that challenge, but the city is trying to be proactive in the recommendations that we're going to make to you this evening. And that will be on a future agenda to get ahead of these potential impacts. So what are we recommending? The city is recommending, based upon discussions with the city's third-party expert on this topic, that the council adopt a detailed design policy document prior to January 14th. So right now you have an ordinance that specifies some general processes and procedures for these installations, but what we're recommending and what the consultant is recommending is we bring back to you a very detailed document that outlines size, location, those types of things in which the city can still control with this new ruling to you for specific adoption. And so what we're proposing, you will see on your December 12th agenda, is an amendment to the existing ordinance as well as that design policy. And we're still working on that design policy, so there's still some I's to dot and some T's to cross. But what I can tell you is right now, in the existing ordinance, there's some size limitations to the equipment that can go on city-owned streetlights. And in talking with the telecoms, including AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile's, and other, what we've found and recognized is that the limitations on the size of the equipment in the ordinance is rather restrictive in what's in the city's ordinance today. So what we are looking to do is increase the size dimensions of some of the equipment you see here on the screen to the size basically that you see here on the screen. It's a good representation. that allows the telecoms to make sure that they can put the necessary equipment in these facilities to meet their needs as well. It's not going to get to the point where on the first slide you saw the boxes everywhere. That's not the intent. The intent is, again, to try to meet them in the middle and understand what their needs are and come up with a solution that works for everybody. So again, that design policy document is going to take a lot of what we're already doing today, amend some of the size requirements, but essentially put forth a document that is adopted formally that will govern those aesthetic and logistical regulations. Because another thing that we're concerned about and still are concerned about to a certain extent is ancillary equipment that may be placed. Potentially, we don't want that ground mounted, meaning we don't want, there's just limited room in the right-of-way that the city has. We have ADA accessibility issues and other issues that we want to avoid, and we think we can do that. We've been talking with the carriers and feel comfortable that we're moving in the right direction. So we do plan on finalizing that draft policy here in the next several days. We do intend to share it with the telecom companies once it is finalized. Again, absent that adopted policy and amended ordinance, will be fully subject to the FCC regulations, including having very little control over the appearance and placement of these facilities. Again, I show you the bad example of what we don't want. And then again, what we worked towards and what is in place today, which we think we can get really close to with this policy document. And this is actually, again, another small cell deployment that is in operation just outside the county administration building next to the arena. So with that, we're available for any questions. Public Works Department, we're not asking for any action tonight. Again, we are planning on bringing some documents to you on the 12th just to solidify what we feel is necessary to essentially maintain the aesthetic requirements and the other requirements that council has really already adopted, just in a slightly different format. So with that, available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. On the matter of the litigation with the League of California Cities, that's going to be taken up this Friday at our meeting, so I'll be representing us at that. Councilmember Smith, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. The square footage of the ones the pictures that you showed that we like in our existing ordinance is what?
Our existing ordinance varies between 4 cubic feet, which is under my approval, and then 5 cubic feet, which is under the BZA approval. The slide that you saw that was already installed next to the, on N Street, next to the county's administrative building, that is just over 4 cubic feet. The new FCC law regulations allow up to 28 cubic feet for certain installations.
However, I do want to mention that I think in development of this policy, that number will fall somewhere under 28. We have some ability prior to January 14th to determine that. But again, talking with the telecoms, the 4 cubic, there are different carriers have different types of equipment, and some of them have some equipment that is slightly different in size than others. And so in talking with all of them, somewhere between 4 and 28 is
so seven times what we're looking at here?
That's correct.
That's what's allowed under the FCC.
That's what's allowed under the
potentially.
FCC.
And we believe that we can
we're
compromise somewhere where?
Yeah, I've worked with both Verizon and AT&T. Those are the two larger carriers because they carry a larger bandwidth than the mobility, which was shown in the first picture. Mobility provides for one single bandwidth, where AT&T and Verizon are providing for up to 4 different radio bandwidths. So the question, we're working with them to see what the minimum size that they can provide and still obtain the coverage that they need. Right now, they're in the area between 10 and 15. But we're trying to limit as much as possible to stay within those limits.
So I went and looked at what they set up at Rabobank. What did that calculate out to be?
You know, there was some confusion. What we calculated based off, I had my staff go out there and actually measure that. It was under 10 cubic feet.
And if I may, that's what's pictured here is what you're referring to. So you compare that at about 10 cubic feet to that, I believe, which is about, you said about just under 5. So it's going to be.
So you've got a picture of what they set up at Rabobank?
That's it right there.
Yeah. No, it looked good. And so the shrouding we can still require?
Yes, correct. And that will all be part of that policy that staff is proposing to bring forward. So essentially, Nick and his staff were developing those standards and have been working with the carriers in accordance with the ordinance that was adopted. This just brings that very detailed document that they've been working on to the council, and we believe that helps put in place the standards then through an adopted policy that will then allow the city to continue to be able to require some of those basic aesthetic and logistical standards.
So along with this, then they have to run wire somewhere. They're cutting the street, or how they get into it?
There's two different options. Right now, you'll see a lot of projects, directional drilling projects going around town. That is through a company called Quanta. Quanta is putting in 200 miles of fiber optic, boring 200 miles worth of fiber optic throughout the city for Verizon. That is how they will connect their small cell sites to.
So we're not trenching any streets or anything?
Its majority is boring, but obviously through a boring process, they do have to do utility potholes. AT&T, on the other hand, has a significant amount of infrastructure already in the ground through their normal services, so they will utilize a majority of that. There will be some connections between our streetlight system and to that existing infrastructure or the new infrastructure that Verizon is putting in. But for the power services to the facilities, we're trying to get them to piggyback onto our own street lighting network system, so we don't have additional meters, pedestals in the right-of-way, just trying to limit the amount of infrastructure within the right-of-way that would then impact potentially ADA and other improvements in the right-of-way. And we did work with PG&E, and they allowed for us to use a smart meter puck, which they can install inside the pole device itself.
How many streetlights do we have?
We have a little over 17,000 streetlights. 13,000, roughly 13,000 are the Type 15. That's a standard Caltrans standard Type 15 pole, which you see on the screen. The remaining 4,000 are decorative street lights, which are typically a post top. You do have some different styles down in the Mill Creek area, the lantern styles, but the majority of them are the Type 15.
And they could go on either type?
Right now, they could go on either type. The decorative poles, we are trying to work with the various vendors, if they do go on a decorative pole, that they provide something that is very similar to the pole that's there. And even with the Type 15 poles, when you start adding this much loading to the pole, they will have to replace the pole, because the Type 15 is not structurally capable of holding up to 10, 15 cubic feet of additional load. So we're also working with them, and it's part of the standards to try to have them match a Type 15 pole as much as possible.
So we'll really end up with new poles?
In a lot of cases, yes. The ones that were installed by Mobility that only had the 4 to 5 cubic feet, the Type 15 could hold that additional loading. When you get up higher than, I'm not sure, they'll have to do a structural analysis, but it's a good possibility that a lot of the new poles, or a lot of the poles will be replaced as part of the program.
And at this point, we don't have any idea of the percentage of all the poles, what they would end up, how many of them?
I've heard reports of up to 400 polls from each carrier. So that's a significant amount, and that's just phase one. Is obviously as they roll out 5G, there's going to be a significant amount more to support that system.
Okay, great, thank you.
I don't see any other requests. Do we have a receive and file?
Motion to receive and file.
Give a motion, please cast your votes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Under closed session, item A, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation regarding Timothy Grismore, Xavier Hines versus City of Bakersfield.
Move to adjourn to closed session.
Thank you. We're going to be on a tight schedule, so if we can get in there quickly, that would be great. We have some students here. I think I know somebody from CSUB, Bakersfield College. Also, thank you so much for being here. We'll reconvene around 5:15 if you are planning to stay for that session. Thanks. Reconvening our 3:30 meeting, Madam City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. There was one item in closed session tonight, and by unanimous vote, direction was given to the city attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no further business, our 3:30 meeting is adjourned at 5:22. And we will reconvene for our 5:15 meeting. We're sorry we were late. We ran a little late on our last meeting, so we're just going to take a few minutes so that I can greet some of our guests here, and we will start in about 3 minutes.